And welcome to our program on issues of importance to the Caucasus. Dr. Joanne Lasowski, author and journalism educator, and joining our discussion today is Paul A. Goebel, American analyst and expert on Russia. He served as special advisor on Soviet issues to the former Secretary of State James Baker. He continues a regular blog post on Window on Eurasia on a regular basis, which anyone interested in that region needs to check this out. It's wonderful. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now we have both sides of the border between Azerbaijan and Armenia are opening their checkpoints. What does that suggest for this ongoing conflict? Well,
the first thing is Azerbaijan is perfectly within its rights to open checkpoints on its territory. It's not clear that Armenia has a similar right to do so. There is also there was no agreement in November 20 to end the 46-day war. There was a declaration. A lot of coverage by Westerners and by the Armenians suggests that Azerbaijan is in violation of that agreement. Well, there was no agreement to be in violation of. It doesn't specify the kinds of things that people are saying it specifies. So the first thing is this is all a lot of kabuki theater. It would be a good thing, of course, if the Lachin corridor could be reopened, if things could be calmed down, because in the nature of things, anytime there's a conflict like this, emotions run high. People read it as meaning something much more cosmic than in fact it does. Indeed, the fact that the Azerbaijani decision to set up a border crossing point happened almost on the same day that the Armenians marked the anniversary of the events of 1915, ensured that Armenians would read it in terms of 1915 and that they would use that against Azerbaijan. I think it was a big mistake for Baku to do it then. I don't know why a decision would have been made to do it then, other than perhaps Baku has concluded that Russia is back on its heels, as it were. It's uncertain what to do. Moscow doesn't want to offend Azerbaijan. It doesn't want to lose its positions in Armenia, and so it's doing pretty much nothing. And clearly, the Azerbaijani authorities decided that they would take action to push things along. This is a playing out of the fact that in November of 2020, after the 46-day war, Azerbaijan was in a position to occupy all of its territory. That needs to be remembered. The reason it didn't do that, I'm convinced, was that it didn't want to provoke a refugee flow. It didn't want to become viewed as causing a refugee flow, and because it believed that it would get support from Moscow for opening corridors, not just a corridor between through Lachin, but the corridor of Zengezur through what Armenians refer to as Syunik, between Azerbaijan and Nakhichevan. The fact is, there's been no progress on the Nakhichevan-Zengezur corridor, and so I think the Azeris decide, okay, we're going to step up. That Moscow is clearly not certain what to do. It's drawn down its forces in the Caucasus because of the war in Ukraine. And so I think the Azerbaijanis are demonstrating that they are the force on the ground, not Russia. The Armenians are uncertain. On the other hand, of course, the Armenian Prime Minister has issued a statement recognizing the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan. Now, what that means is a big question. Because one person's territorial integrity is another person's carving up of someone else's territory. It depends how you see it, But I think the Azeris decided that things had gone on long enough without any progress. They really expected to, if they were expected to back off in the Lachin area, then they expected progress from both Moscow and Yerevan over Zengezur. There is no agreement. What there was were statements and understandings. And the idea that Armenia or Azerbaijan are in violation of the November 20th declaration is overstating the case. If there were an agreement, yes, but what there was a declaration. People forget just how complicated ending conflicts is, and this one would have required dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of pages of documentation. I think the November 20th accord was 2.5 pages. So we're talking about declarative language that doesn't say very much. It's talking about hopes, and if Armenia and Russia want to play or emphasize their reading of what this meant, it's not surprising that Azerbaijan is playing up to what it understands things to be meant. So, as I say, terrible timing on Baku's part, because it's given Azerbaijan a black eye in the international media, given any time you link things close to 1915. And it's detracted attention from what I think is the big event of this month, and that is the opening of the Azerbaijani embassy in Israel, which represents a remarkable solidification of Azerbaijan as a civil society with the Jewish state, something that Muslim countries aren't very ready to do. So this is a major thing. It's a rapprochement or a development of relations that gives Israeli confidence that if things get out of hand between Tehran and Jerusalem, that Azerbaijan will clearly be on Israel's side, and that changes the nature of the conflict. So, had we not had the Lachin corridor issue, the media story out of the South Caucasus would have been about the Azerbaijani-Israeli developments.
And I definitely want to get back to that. But concerning the date, according to press reports, Armenia opened their checkpoints first. Then Azerbaijan followed suit. And who went first would mitigate the issue about the date, right?
Well, it really doesn't. If one side has an issue that allows it to play up a date, a link to a date, it really doesn't matter whether the other side does something, because that gives the media. I mean, there is no way that a British, American, French, German journalist writing about these events, when they are so close in time between the anniversary of 1915, which is the definitive Armenian Memorial Day, if you will, the question of who is first gets lost very quickly, and the issue of, is this another step in that direction, which people will be horrified by. President Biden issued a very strong statement this year on the 1915 anniversary, and so you expect that. The issue of who did what first, it always is hard to be absolutely certain who got everything built at one particular time. I find that, that it's interesting as a matter of history, but it usually is played. And my sense is that the timing isn't nearly as important as the other. The fact is that any Armenian opening of any institution on the territory of Lachin is opening an Armenian facility on the territory of Azerbaijan.
Mm-hmm.
If Azerbaijan opens something on Azerbaijan's territory, that is, under international law, a completely legitimate action. If Armenia has Armenians on the territory of Azerbaijan and opens an Armenian institution, it's taking a much stronger political act. So, I mean, it doesn't want, I don't want to suggest, to equate the two things and then worry about who was first by a day or two. I'm much more worried about how the way in which this was done, the timing of this from Azerbaijan's position has changed the nature of the coverage that Azerbaijan is getting. It didn't need to take the hit that it got this week. It really didn't. It could have held back. It could have waited another week or 10 days. And the reality is that by that point, journalists wouldn't have linked it together. But this week, unthinkable not to link it together.
So the people in Azerbaijan appear to be delighted with the news of opening the checkpoints. Social media participants have been dancing in the streets, so to speak, saying they've wanted this for a really long time. But the foreign minister in Azerbaijan said that because Russia was involved in this plan to reopen the checkpoints, this is not as joyful as it should be.
Well, I agree.
Is making this very complex.
Well, I mean, the Russians undertook as a matter of declaration, but not as a matter of formal agreement, to be in charge of the access through Lachin. The so-called Russian peacekeepers, and I say so-called before them in every case, have not lived up to what were the promises made in November of 20 or in January of 21. They've made claims, they've gotten in the way, they have not, they've not lived up to their promises. Some people see that as their way of getting in the way of what Azerbaijan wants to do. Others, on other occasions, see it as getting in the way of what Armenia wants to do. I think the Russians have an interest in keeping the pot bubbling, and I think that that's what's going on. I can only agree with the foreign ministry statement in Baku that because the Russians are involved, this is hardly the definitive advancement, definitive step forward, but it may become such. That is to say, if the Russians have simply expressed deep concern, well, when you start expressing deep concern, it's because you don't have anything else in your pocket to do. And I think that the Russians don't have much to do. I think that they wish that this wouldn't have happened, because at some point it's going to be the case that Azerbaijan is going to be in control of this area. And if it's in control of this area, Moscow's ability to keep its peacekeepers there after the 5-year term, Moscow's ability to cause trouble on the ground will be profoundly limited. It won't disappear, but it will be profoundly limited.
So the Russian foreign minister, as you said, is deeply concerned. The U.S. State Department is deeply concerned.
Right.
They added that it undermines efforts toward peace. What do you think about these two deeply concerning?
Well, people,
on both sides here?
if something happens that you don't like, but there's not much you can or are willing to do about it, being deeply concerned is what you're going to be. It reminds me in my own country of people who are deeply concerned about school violence but won't do anything about gun control. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's something the same way. I have believed, and I still am convinced, that peace is going to come in the South Caucasus when Armenians and Azerbaijanis sit down and talk to each other. And it won't be imposed by anyone else. It's going to require intense, long-term standing relationships at a variety of levels between Baku and Yerevan. Conversations become more difficult if you have a flashpoint, as this does, and so it's regrettable in a way that it happened. It's certainly regrettable that it happened the week it happened, and I think the question is, where are we going to be in 2 weeks? I mean, that if after 2 weeks the fact on the ground has been created and accepted, well, then the reality is that you're going to have an Armenian border crossing point on Azerbaijani territory and an Azerbaijani crossing point on Azerbaijani territory. That doesn't move you forward very far. And so the danger is that things could get out of hand. And then what do the Russians do? I mean, at some point, I suspect there is enough support in Azerbaijan for doing something about this. Now, I hope that President Aliyev shows the caution and sophistication he showed in 2020 when he could have easily taken Stepanakert but didn't. That, I think, was a very clever move. I think he didn't get what he expected. I think he expected to be given more than he was for his, concessionary move, if you will. But I think the question now is, okay, it's been 3 years, or almost 3 years. What's going to happen? And the fact is, we're the ones, Azerbaijani position, we're the ones who can define the outcome. The Russian forces can't prevent the outcome. The Armenians are not in a position to force the outcome. And once that's recognized, then one would expect that negotiations would proceed to recognize that reality and formalize it. I think that Pashinyan, the Prime Minister of Armenia, understands that. I think the Russians understand it and don't like it. I think the Americans would prefer that there not be flashpoints because when there's a flashpoint, it becomes unpredictable. So the fact that people are deeply concerned, there's slightly different reasons for being deeply concerned, but basically what you're saying is we're worried about what this will mean, but we're not really in a position to do a whole lot about it. And I think it says a lot that Foreign Minister Lavrov of the Russian Federation is saying these kinds of things, because that's not what you'd expect from someone who, at least nominally, has 2,000 plus troops on the ground who are supposed to be keeping the sides apart.
Yeah, the Russian troops don't seem to be doing their job. But now I'm a little confused why either state, the US or Russia, would be deeply concerned over a country protecting its own rights to sovereignty and keeping the road existing and being able to monitor when arms are brought across that road. I mean,
well, I think
country has the right to do that.
They're deeply concerned because the fact is that not everybody has the same interpretation of Azerbaijani sovereignty that you're using. They are afraid that this could trigger a new round of violence, which neither Moscow nor Washington wants. They're concerned that if there's a new round of violence, it's not unthinkable that Iran could get involved. Mm-hmm. That it would take advantage of a new round of conflict. People are concerned about that. I suspect that's very much a worry in Washington, probably less of a worry in Moscow, but I think it's there. And so, when things are calm, you don't worry about things getting out of hand. When something happens that risks triggering things, then you do. And when you don't see your way forward to being able to do much, then you express concern, deep concern. And it says more, quite frankly, that Russia is expressing deep concern than it does anyone else, because the Russians ought with the troops they have on the ground and the supposed mandate that they are routinely claiming, ought to be able to do something about this. And the fact that they can't says a whole lot about Russia's position in the region. And it's not a conclusion that I think our Russian friends want anyone to draw.
Thank you, Paul. Looking at today's news, President Biden just announced his intentions to run for re-election. Now, you being the expert, what does that mean for the Russian-Ukrainian war?
Well, it all depends who wins.
Right.
I mean, assuming that President Biden is reelected, it means that there will be a great deal of pressure to continue massive Western support of Ukraine. It almost certainly means that sometime in the next year to 18 months, Ukraine will be offered a membership action plan to join NATO. It means that the integration of Ukraine into the West will proceed right along. It means that there isn't going to be a rapprochement with Moscow and Washington anytime soon. And it probably means that the sanctions regime will deepen, probably in the direction that the G7 is talking about, a complete embargo on the sale of goods to the Russian Federation. In other words, you're going to see more of the same, but more of the same that will have consequences. I think that Mr. Putin has already won the award for NATO Recruiter of the Year by getting the Finns to join NATO. I think the amazing thing is that he now may see that what he's done gets Ukraine in NATO. And if President Biden is reelected, I find it very, very difficult to imagine that Ukraine will not be in NATO by 2025 or 2026, and that's a earth-shattering thing. And it's a tectonic shift because then the United States and the Western Alliance is putting its full faith and credit down on the side of the Ukrainians against Russian aggression, and that puts Putin in a box. And what he'll do, we'll see.
So if the other occurs, if there's another shift to former President Trump, why is Putin so eager for Trump to be in power? Because
Donald Trump has said on occasion that Putin is so terribly smart that Donald Trump can end the war in 24 hours, which the only way that happens is by insisting that the Ukrainians accept the territorial losses that they've already suffered, a reality that, quite frankly, somebody can say it, but I don't think the Ukrainians are going to accept that ever. Too many people have been killed, too much violence has been visited upon that country. If I have said from the beginning that if Russia were in fact able to occupy all of Ukraine, it would create for itself a disaster of such monumental size that it would regret that it had ever done that, because it would have living in its borders 35 million people who hated them, and they would not give up. In all of this conflict, it's been forgotten that it took Stalin 10 years to stop the Ukrainian resistance after World War II. Well, if given what Stalin was prepared to do, if it took that long, think how long it would take Vladimir Putin. And so I find the idea that the United States would change course and desert Ukraine, it would have terrible consequences for the Western Alliance. It would raise questions about the commitment of NATO to the values that it holds. It would make the alliance would become very much less an American-led institution and become a sort of spread about in ways that would weaken it, and that would only encourage dictators like Putin to try to use force other places. So I care. I'm a one-issue person. I like NATO. I want to see NATO survive. I want to see NATO prosper. I think that Americans tend to forget that NATO is the only institutional integument we have that links us to Western Europe. And if we lose that, then what people are pleased to call the West dissolves. And consequently, anything that weakens NATO, in my mind, is a very dangerous step.
So back to the West against Russia or Moscow, it seems that they both are working on a new meeting between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and it seems a little competitive there. What are the key issues that need to be addressed in order for either one of those groups to bring these two conflicting parties together and find a lasting peace?
Well, the point is that the same issues that have been in place since 1988 are still there. You have a group of people who want to operate on the basic principle being the territorial integrity of states, and those who want to recognize the right of nations to self-determination. Those are not always in conflict. They are in this case. How you square that is something that the two sides have never been able to agree, and it's not clear that they can. We'll see. My own view is the only way you do that is not by having outside actors and diplomats running around, but rather by having Armenians and Azerbaijanis talk to one another. I was quite hopeful after the 46-day war that we would see, or that we saw for a while, more such bilateral talks. I mean, not just at the prime minister and presidential level, but right down through the minister, deputy minister, office director level. And I think that if we can start that again, there's hope, at least, that some understandings can be reached if we act as if any outsider can come in and come up with a brilliant plan that everyone will say, oh, we didn't see it that way, but clearly that's where we want to go. I don't see that happening. I think it's going to have to come from below, and that's going to take time. And to assume that that any outside actor, and I mean any outside actor, is going to be able to come up with a solution that both sides are going to like, and then they'll instantly have peace and happiness forever, I just see no basis for that.
So it really doesn't matter which.
Well, look, if outsiders encourage Armenians and Azerbaijanis to talk to one another, if they give them occasions for that, that's a positive thing. If the outside actors think that their job is to come up with a solution that the Armenians and Azerbaijanis will somehow salute, that's going to fail. It's failed now for 35 years. It will continue to fail, in my view. It's going to require that the two sides talk to each other a lot and begin to see that for all the conflicts they do have some equities together. And, you know, can Gyumri be a land port between the North Caucasus, southern Russia, and Turkey? At least possibly, if you get some kind of a settlement. Is that by itself going to lead to peace and happiness in Stepanakert? I rather doubt it.
I want to get back to something, this is what we'll close with, Paul. I want to get back to something that you mentioned earlier about the Azerbaijanis opening their embassy in Israel and the upheaval that caused. What does that mean across the region for conflict?
First off, it's the Aliyev government is making it very clear that Azerbaijan, while it has a Muslim population, is a secular state, that it relates to other countries as other secular states, as states that are are committed to international law. That's the first thing it means. And so that puts Azerbaijan in a different category than most of the Muslim world. That's terribly important for Azerbaijan's relations with Europeans, with the Americans, and with the Chinese. So those are all pluses from Azerbaijan's point of view of putting it that way. Also because Israel has a major interest in having an ally to the north of Iran in case things go south in relations between Jerusalem and Tehran. Having an ally north of Iran is a big plus for the Israelis. So this is more than just opening an office. This is embedding Azerbaijan in a set of relationships which will play to its benefit in many parts of the world, including first instance in Israel, but more generally.
Well, it's something that we'll keep our eyes peeled to, and we'll also keep our eyes peeled to Window on Eurasia, where we'll see some of your insights on paper, or I guess online. And thank you for doing that, Paul, and thank you for your discussion today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Take care.
You too.